Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 of Ark's creatures that are well known to non-Ark players. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really does help the channel. In at number 10 is the Theory. Now, Theories also have another nickname called the Tickle Chicken after Freddy Krueger, and some people may also just call them Freddy Krueger because of their long claws. But also on top of all of that, from other things, the Therizinosaurus is a very well-known dino, and when it comes to Ark, if people list Ark dinos, even though they haven't played it before, the Theory will turn up in a load of cases, as it is just such an iconic dinosaur in its manner. This thing is just so recognizable for its big claws. But in terms of its use, this thing is an extremely great Ark harvester, which every player at some point should be aiming to get. The Theory is an insane gatherer of things like wood, thatch, and berries on top of all of that, and I think it can gather meat as well, which makes this thing a really useful herbivore. On top of that, this is by far the best creature to use for the dragon boss fight on the island, as the dragon's fire is really not so kind to carnivorous creatures, but since the Theory is a herbivore, you will be fine with that completely. But the only real downside about the Theory is its healing food. When you want to heal the Theory really quickly, you'll need sweet vegetable cake, and that is really, really expensive. In at number 9 is the Allosaurus. Now, some may mistake this creature to the Rex, but in terms of its model in Ark, this thing is extremely iconic, and from loads of dinosaur movies out there, the Allosaurus is an extremely well-known dinosaur, which is very popular among others, as it is essentially a Rex that is quicker and faster, and somehow in some cases a lot more deadly. And in Ark, in many cases, that is the case. Allosauruses come in packs of 3, and each of those packs will contain a pack alpha, and you will know which one's a pack alpha as they will have an orange glow. But don't mistake the Megatherium's orange glow for a pack buff. That is a completely different thing altogether. Now, with the Allosaurus as well, these things are significantly faster than a creature like the Rex, but I think the Spino is still a bit faster than them. But the Allosaurus also does have good stamina as well. Compared to something like the Rex, they are much better for moving around, and they do not get stuck on all of Ark's objects. Also, compared to the Rex, I don't know why I'm comparing to the Rex so much, these things attack a lot faster, like a significant amount faster. Also, they do have a bleed ability as well, which makes these things extremely useful, as no matter the health of the creature you're fighting, you can still tank loads and loads of damage out of it. And it may work for bosses, but I'm not quite sure about that. The Deinonychus is definitely a better boss creature than the Allosaurus, but the Allosaurus is still a reasonably good boss creature. It only really fails with its health stat, which can be pretty low compared to some other carnivores. But the thing is, with the Allo, it is still a very viable creature, which is 100% worth your tame, and throughout all this b-roll, you've seen me kill a wealth of creatures with it. It is definitely a useful Ark creature, and it is well known with others. If you do pull up a conversation where you say, hey, do you know what an Allosaurus is? Most people will say yes, and you'll just give you the answer that it is a extremely powerful large carnivore. Definitely well known. In at number 7 is the Brontosaurus. Now, this is one of the only herbivores on the list, but it's mainly well known for its extreme size. The Brontosaurus is absolutely massive, and it appears in loads of films again. I feel like a repeating record right now because I keep saying the same things, but really all of these creatures' fame are mainly rooted in the media and films like that. But the thing is, with the Bronto in Ark, this is by far the best berry gatherer you can really get. If you do want to compromise on size a bit though, the Diplo may be a good shout, and the Stego is a great option as well. But if you want the most berries possible and you're on a PvE server, go straight ahead with a Bronto tame. Whereas if you're on a PvP server, you might want to be a little bit more cautious, as they are quite big and they will definitely stand out a lot. So if you're on a PvP server, really watch out. In at number 6 is the Carbenemes. Now this actually is mainly well known from Ark Mobile. But also this thing does appear quite a lot, and it is definitely a very recognizable creature in Ark. This is a staple, even though it isn't on any Ark wallpaper. It is still extremely well known by the community, as the Ark model for the carb enemies is just so well known around many people. If you see this, you either say something like turtle, or if you do know the full name, you will say carb enemies. Either way, most people will easily be able to recognize one of these things. Maybe they won't get the full name, but still they'll know it's rooted from Ark, and they will know what this thing is. And if they are further developed, then they'll probably get the name no problems at all. But really, its model just really sums up this creature in so many ways to all of the community. But in terms of the carb enemy's use, this thing is extremely great in the early game as a sea creature. You may not see it as a sea creature when you actually start out in Ark, but this thing is extremely useful and is definitely worth all of your time trying to tame one of these things. They're definitely very easy, they just require some tranks, no problem at all. Or alternatively, you could easily use something like a club if you're being a bit more risky, but I'd probably go for something like a slingshot in the early game, as they really are not very difficult to tame, as these things are quite slow, but that comes to your advantage. In at number 5 is the Uteranus. Now, a lot of people just call this thing the Furry Rex, but in terms of Ark, if you've watched anything, and Ark boss videos are definitely a very popular thing, you will see the UT coming up in loads and loads of those instances, and that is why this thing is well known. In all manner of Ark content, this thing is shown a lot. There are many breeding videos on it, there are so many tutorials on how to get the best UTs out there, and also just for boss videos, the UT is absolutely everywhere, and that is because this thing is pretty much an essential boss creature, as it has two major abilities. It has its Fear Roar, which will debuff the enemy creatures, and it has its much more popular Courage Roar, which will buff your creatures and also debuff the enemy creatures. And that is why this thing is so useful in the cases of bosses, as you can just tank through them so much faster. If you have it on top of other buffs like the Megatherium has with the Broodmother, it can be an absolutely insane pairing, and you can shred through bosses with 100% ease. You will have no problem if you have a good UT with good buffs, and also if your other creatures are good as well, as you still do need good other Ark creatures to keep up with the UT's absolutely insane abilities. In at number 5 is the Stego. The Stegosaurus is definitely a well-known creature in all kinds of dinosaur media. Even if you look at Tom Scar's Astus movie, a Stegosaurus, although it doesn't appear, its name still appears in those sketches, and over 60 million people have pretty much watched every single one. The Stegosaurus is definitely a very widely well-known creature for things like Jurassic Park as well. Again, I don't know if one of them does actually show up, but still, the Stegosaurus is one of the most iconic creatures, and obviously it's in Ark as well, which is why it's on this list. In terms of the Stego's actual use in the game, it has a really great PvE use, but also a really great PvP use since the TLC update 3.0 came out. Firstly, with its PvE use, this thing is a really great berry harvester. It is absolutely insane for all things berries, and it is actually a reasonable dealer of damage. But in terms of that PvP scenario, it has 3 plate abilities. It has its heavy plate, which is great for gathering wood, its hardened plate, which is really great for soaking turrets, and it also does have the sharpened plate, which is what you'll use for gathering all of those berries right up. The Stego really is so versatile to any Ark player. This thing is a must-have tame at some point in your journey. In at number 4 is the Carno. Now, to anyone out there that watched iBallistic Squid's Ark videos back in the day, all the way back in 2015 and 2016, you will know of the Carnotaurus very well. But to all of you other people that didn't watch those videos, the Carnotaurus is still a very, very widely known Ark creature among many people. This thing is very iconic for many facts that it has around this creature. Like, Carnotauruses are so powerful, they could easily break through something like a safe. And that does appear in many kinds of videos on YouTube and other platforms alike as well. But also with those horns that it has on its head and its tiny arms, this thing is just a really iconic dinosaur that anyone who is vaguely into dinosaurs or has done any research into dinosaurs will easily be able to identify this thing. But in terms of its in-game use, this thing is an extremely good carnivore and an extremely good fighter as well. Its health is reasonably good, it does definitely stack up. Its stamina is a bit lacking in some cases, but overall it is not as bad as a creature like the Rex would have. And also its second attack ability, also known as its headbutt, deals a bleed ability, which is really OP, and I went into it more when I was talking about the Allo. No matter the health of the creature that you're fighting, you're still dealing a percentage of its health in damage, which again is really OP. In at number 3 is the Wyvern. Now, the Wyvern worldwide is just a very well-known thing, and it makes sense why it would be very high on this list. But also, the Wyvern is a very popular Ark creature, and again is very well-known among pretty much any human in the world that has any contact with this kind of content that I make and many other content creators make in a similar field. The Wyvern is a dragon-like creature with wings, because yes, some dragons do not have wings. For example, Chinese dragons don't most of the time, some of them do, but either way, the Wyvern is a winged dragon which has a wealth of abilities, usually rooted in things like element. But in this case, Ark goes a bit off with the Fire Wyvern, which just stays the same. Then you have the Poison Wyvern, which is a bit off there. The Ice Wyvern stays en route, but then also you do have the Lightning Wyvern, which doesn't really match the form again. You probably expect Earth, Fire, Wind, Water, and Earth, something along those lines. But with Crystal Wyverns, there are Blood Wyverns and there are Water Wyverns, and there are probably more on top of that. I'm not really the best for studying Crystal Wyverns, but I know there are definitely a few more variants of Crystal Wyverns out there than the ones that I just mentioned. But in Ark, the Wyvern is a great creature, dealing an insane amount of damage. Its turning circle isn't that great, but this thing can pick up a wealth of larger creatures. In at number 2 is the Pteranodon. On top of this thing being a very well-known Ark creature, this is just a very well-known dinosaur overall by so many people out there. The Pteranodon is very iconic, showing up in Jurassic Park and Jurassic World as well. At least I'm pretty sure this thing does show up in Jurassic Park. Either way, it does show up in Jurassic World. And actually, Pteranodon isn't a dinosaur, it is a pterosaur, but everyone does still call this thing a dinosaur. Either way, like I've said, this thing is extremely well known because of loads of films, and also this thing is just so iconic in its shape, with its horn-like thing rotting out of its head, and also its very dinosaur-like structure, even though this thing has wings. And obviously there are many other creatures like it as well. The Quetzal is an example there. But in terms of its use in Ark, the Pteranodon is an extremely good flyer for those beginner Ark tamers. This thing really isn't that difficult, and its saddle is unlocked at level 38. The only real difficulty is gathering the chitin or keratin required to actually make that saddle. You'd be surprised the Pteranodon actually does a very reasonable amount of melee damage considering it is a flyer, and also this thing is unlocked at level 38. Especially its spin attack ability, this thing is an extremely powerful Ark creature when put into good use, especially in PvP scenarios. When you are raiding bases, you can just spam that spin attack and it is so easy to destroy everything inside someone's base, unless it is obviously tech or equivalent to that. Now, the Pteranodon does lack on stamina and weight, sadly, but it is still a tame 100% worth getting. And finally, in at number 1 is the Rex. Now, would it be a most famous dinosaurs video if the Rex wasn't on this list? Obviously, the Rex was going to turn in right at that number 1 spot. The Rex is by far the world's most iconic dinosaur. You just show any carnivore to the general person, and if they have little dinosaur knowledge, they will just say it is a T-Rex. This dinosaur is by far one of the most worldwide spread carnivores, and this thing is so iconic in all of its features. Its big head, its big teeth, its iconically chunky and long tail, and its insane stomp and roar, even though it didn't really have a roar like we would think it would have a roar, as it patrolled that Cretaceous landscape of when it existed over 66 million years ago. In terms of the Rex's use in Ark, this thing is an extremely useful creature that is mainly used for bosses, as this thing is a very balanced Ark tame, which really does matter, as long as those stats which are balanced are actually good stats in the first place. The Rex has a very solid health stat, a very solid melee stat. Its stamina is a bit lacking, and so is its weight, but that really does not matter when you're in a combat situation. The Rex is truly one of the best creatures for combat, and especially with X variants on Genesis Part 1, these things can be upgraded even further to the next level. Ark's 10 best tames for getting on with that grind. In at number 10 is the Castoroides, also known as the beaver. This thing is an extremely useful tame for gathering wood, and it is okay for gathering things like silica pearls, as this thing is a reasonably good swimmer. But to be honest, what would you expect? This thing is a beaver. Also, if you're on the hunt for cementing paste as well, beaver dams are a great shout for getting all of that, and you can also get rare flowers, rare mushrooms, and I think even silica pearls from beaver dams as well. So it is definitely a great shout to go and raid those as well. But the beaver, obviously, as I said before, is a really good gatherer of wood. It means you don't even need to have something like a chainsaw to get all of that necessary wood. Also, on top of all of that, like the RG, the Castoroides saddle is also a portable smithy. I don't really know why it is, as it doesn't really have any involvement with metal gathering, but its saddle does act as a portable smithy, so if your tools break when you're out gathering with one of these things, you can actually repair them in its saddle, which just acts as a normal smithy. The Castoroides is definitely a tame that you should get at some point, but they can be a little aggressive when they're in larger groups. In at number 9 is the Bronto. This is probably Ark's best berry harvester, and obviously this is a grind. You're going to be grinding all of those narco berries for all of those narcotics, and if you can shell out for a Bronto, then you are definitely doing extremely good, as the Bronto has such a wide gathering range. It is absolutely insane how many berries you can gather with this thing just from one attack. A lot more than something like a Stego, a Parasaur, or even a Diplo, even though I tend to use a Diplo a lot more, as they are smaller and a lot easier to tame. You can always shell out for a Diplo if you can't go the full stretch to do something like a Bronto. The Diplo is only a passive tame, so no tranks are required at all. But the Bronto is definitely the step up that at some point you should get, as it gathers so many berries. It is 100% worth it. In at number 8 is the Beelzebufo. Now, over the past couple of weeks, my opinion has changed quite a lot on this, and actually yesterday I tested it out, and it definitely is a very viable gatherer of cementing paste. And actually, this thing is really a great shout if beaver dams for some reason don't spawn on your map, or if you have a really good level frog with a good level saddle, it can be a good shout to get one, as when these things kill insects, these things gather so much cementing paste, and it is really great if you want to do the insect cave on the island, which is located in the redwoods. Yes, you'll need to level up one to actually allow it to have enough health and enough damage to withstand those, but the amount of cementing paste gains you get from that is absolutely insane. And if you haven't played Ark before, then you wouldn't know how important cementing paste is for the game. It's used in things like saddles, weapons, and all of that kind of business. Even metal structures. It doesn't seem like that would be the thing for it, but yes, metal structures even use cementing paste, and many mods use it as well. It is definitely an essential resource, and gathering it is a lot better than crafting it, as the amount of chitin, keratin, and rocks you need to gather is absolutely absurd and not worth it. In at number 7 is the Basilosaurus. This is by far one of the best creatures to go into the ocean with and go and loot all of that ocean loot. It is also great for grinding through all of those ocean caves as well. This is a great shout for anything underwater. It deals a very reasonable amount of damage. It is immune to things like Tusos, jellyfish, and electric eels, which makes this thing just so powerful compared to any other creature. Even creatures like the Mosasaur do not have this ability. And also with the X-Basilosauruses on Genesis Part 2, these things are even better as they have damage reduction on top of all of those stats which I have just previously mentioned. The Basilo only does have one real disadvantage, which is if it goes too deep, this thing will start taking damage, and also its taming method can be a bit of an annoyance as well, as getting rid of all of those mantas that are around it can be a very challenging task, even though it doesn't seem like it. Also, they are a passive tame, so taming can be a little slow. In at number 6 is the Snow Owl. Now, you may think this thing only spawns on Extinction, but it is accessible on many other maps, like I'm pretty sure this thing is accessible on Fjordur. And the Snow Owl is 100% worth your tame. With a simple trap or the net gun, I think you can net gun this. This is a very easy tame that will not really take you any time at all. The Snow Owl has a wealth of abilities. Firstly, its dive bomb ability, which it also does share with the Griffin. Except on the Snow Owl, it has been further refined and developed, and it feels a lot smoother, and for some reason feels a bit faster as well, but that might just be me. Also, on top of that, the Snow Owl has this kind of heat-seeking ability, which is really great for any of you PvP players out there. As you can see, any players that may be hiding in bushes, as it will see through all of these kind of objects, and they will have this glowing heat, which you can see on screen here. And that is such an easy way to detect people that may be raiding your base and you have lost them, so then you can quickly find them and dispose of them as you wish. Also, these things do have a healing ability as well, very similar to the Daedon, except this uses stamina and not food. Also, on top of all of that, it will heal enemy creatures and wild creatures as well, which can work in your favor, but it is definitely something to consider, as you might not want to use it in a raid right in front of the enemy creatures, as you'll be healing them as well, and it will also render you immobile, which may not be great if someone is trying to kill you. So definitely be careful when you are using this ability, and really take into mind when you're using it. Yes, compared to the Managama on Extinction, this thing really does pale in comparison in terms of speed, but all of its other abilities makes this a much more useful creature for PvE, and I would say for PvP as well, except some of you may disagree with me there, as the Managama really is overpowered, even after that thing got nerfed. But overall, these things are also really good for getting that metal grind on. In at number 5 is the gas bags, yet another creature that is originally on Extinction, but now can be found on other maps like Fjordur. This thing is definitely a great grinding creature for gathering things like metal and any other resources that have a really heavy carry weight. Also, on top of all of that, this thing's saddle doesn't even need a saddle to ride it. Yes, the gas bags does have a saddle, but that is only required if you need 2 people riding on it at the same time. And for this thing, it can be a very reasonable flying taxi if you do want to go around with your friend and gather up some metal. Except the main thing is, these things are very difficult to control, as they have these kind of gas flying control abilities, and I am absolutely terrible still to this day at controlling it. And also, if you did want longer fly times, as you may have seen in the B-roll a little bit earlier, you need to level up their oxygen stats, and obviously this will enable them to fly further distances as they can breathe in more air. Don't level up stamina if you're trying to fly longer distances. That simply is not going to work in any manner at all. Also, these things are actually reasonably good turret soakers, as when they breathe up with their gas, they have so much damage reduction, and you'll probably know that, as if you're trying to tame one and it blows up, you'll need a significantly larger amount of tranks to knock it out, as obviously it will have torpor reduction as well. But definitely be careful of when this thing runs out of gas and you come plummeting back down to the map. Remember to always dismount just before you hit the ground, so you will take no fall damage, as you really do not want to lose your gas bags, as sometimes they can be a bit of a pain to tame. They are a lot better now with net guns, but it still is a real shame if you lose one of these things, as it is a bit of a hassle to tame them. Yes, it may not be the most difficult tame out there, but you really do not want to be losing this thing to fall damage. In at number 4 is the Mantis. Now, this is by far one of my favourite Ark creatures, and it is an essential on maps like Scorched Earth and Ragnarok. And yes, some people may still think that the Mantis only spawns on Scorched Earth, but this thing also does spawn on Ragnarok as well, and that is definitely my preferred area to tame it, as you can use woolly rhino horns instead of using deathworm horns. Yes, you can use woolly rhino horns on Scorched Earth, but you do have to do a bit more transferring, so you might as well just do it on a map where woolly rhinos spawn, which is Ragnarok. And Ragnarok is a lot more friendly in its environment where the Mantis spawned as well. But enough about how to tame this thing, what about its grinding capabilities? This thing, if you didn't know already, or if you didn't look at the screen for some reason, can equip melee weapons. Yes, any kind of melee weapon. That be a pick, a hatchet, a pike, a sickle, whatever melee weapon you want. I'm not sure about tech weapons, but apart from that, you are good to go. This is great for doing any kind of meat gathering. It's very good at doing metal gathering, flint gathering, stone gathering, fiber gathering, maybe not berry gathering because it's not a berry harvester, but any resource that can be gathered via melee weapons, this thing has you covered on so many terms, and it is a really great harvester and arc grinder. In at number 3 is the Carcharodontosaurus. Now, you may not consider this thing a harvester. Well, I would definitely disagree with you there. This thing is by far one of the best harvesters of meat in the game. The Giga would have been in this position, but the Carcharodontosaurus is so much easier to use in the Giga for gathering meat that the Giga doesn't even really deserve a place on this list anymore. The Carcharodontosaurus is a lot faster than the Giga. The Carcharodontosaurus has a lot more stamina than the Giga, which really makes this thing not a pain to use. And when its Blood Rage ability is at its fullest, this thing does even more damage than the Giga. I think it's about 1.5 times on average, so this thing is a true beast. Also, on top of that, you do not have to worry about the rage meter, as the Carcharodontosaurus simply doesn't have one, which is really great if you are harvesting some bigger carnivores. It's just one less thing that you do not have to stress over and worry that you will lose your tame over. But like every great creature, this also does have a downside as well, which is its taming method is a bit annoying at times, and it can be quite buggy as well. But if you did want a good guide on how to tame yourself a Carcharodontosaurus, you can go check out my Carcharodontosaurus guide on my channel. As you know, you may want to tame yourself a Carcharodontosaurus considering how good they are. In at number 2 is the RG. Now, this is by far one of the best creatures for just gathering resources in itself. Yes, this isn't the creature that is going to be doing the resource gathering. That creature is in number 1, by the way, but this is the creature that's going to get you from point A to B and carry all of those resources around with you. The Argentavis is a really great tame, which is insane for gathering resources like metal, obsidian, crystal, etc. If it comes from a mountain region, this thing probably has some insane weight reduction on it. Also, its saddle acts as a portable smithy as well, so when you're harvesting with those weapons or the creature that is in number 1, you can quickly fix them up. And it is also great if you're on your travels and your armor's broken and you're wearing flak at the time, you can quickly repair it inside the RG as long as you have a bit of smelted metal inside its inventory, and it is a really great feature to have. Also, this thing is reasonably good for taming as well. Its taming method isn't that bad, and on top of that, this thing can carry a wealth of creatures, similarly to the Wyvern actually, which makes it extremely useful. And it has a secret hidden ability where if it eats a dead corpse, it will have some insane regen. And in at number 1 is the Anki. The Anki is by far the best creature for gathering metal. And if you've ever wondered, yes, you have the stone pick, then you have the metal pick. Surely there should be another tier of pickaxe. And in this case, that tier is the Anki. Obviously, you have the Doedicurus here as well, which is great for gathering things like stone, but for things like metal, which you're really going to be grinding a lot of, the Anki is the way to go. The Doedicurus simply is not going to gather any of those resources at the level that the Anki does. Also, the Anki can be picked up with the RG and is a really great pairing with it, as you can simply pick up the Anki with the RG and dangle it over some metal nodes, and it will simply swipe and gather up all of that metal. It is a super easy way to get metal, it's really efficient, and you're going to be gathering a lot of metal in really large quantities. And also, like the RG, this thing has great weight as well. I'm not sure if it has weight reduction, but you can always put it into the RG if you want that insane weight reduction, which is partly why they are a really great pairing. Don't really use this thing for combat though, even though it looks really tough. Yes, it has a lot of damage reduction, but its damage really does not hold up. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. What was your favourite creature on this list? And comment your top 10 creatures that you like to grind with in Ark down below. And I will see you all later. Bye.